Desertification. What is it? What causes it? And how do we combat it? So let's start by defining desertification. Desertification is the process by which dry lands that were once capable of cultivating crops become arid due to both natural processes and human interference. This land degradation comes as a result of the changing climate, which causes severe weather phenomena, global warming, and longer periods of drought. It can also be attributed to overexertion of land by humans, particularly in the agriculture industry. This includes improper practices regarding the ownership of livestock, such as overgrazing, poor structuring of irrigation systems, and unsustainable methods of crop production. So why is desertification so bad? Well, one effect is that farming becomes next to impossible on affected land, which means a decreased food supply for the general public, and also leaves those making their living on farms without an assured income. Another is that in deserts, both wet and dry, water shortages become commonplace. Areas that are drier don't have a sustainable water supply to begin with, and thus are left totally depleted. In wetter deserts, flooding becomes more common because of the lack of botanical life, leading to contamination of the water supply, leaving it undrinkable. Though the situation seems desperate, there are several solutions that may be implemented to stop the effects of desertification at its roots. One example would be to educate agricultural communities on the negative effects of poor irrigation systems and methods of combating these effects by explaining how to properly drain salt from the soil, which makes the water used for irrigation systems toxic to crops and jeopardizing to the land. Other points of education would be ensuring livestock does not harm the land by overgrazing, and how to properly rotate crops to protect the natural nutrients in the soil. To prevent these outcomes, we will create a set of guidelines for maintaining a sustainable agricultural community, and we will encourage the implementation of routine checks to ensure these guidelines are followed. By providing communities with resources and education, the preservation of fertile land will be assured, and new jobs will be created to implement new irrigation systems, as well as to continue to ensure that farms are properly maintaining these new systems. Local economies will be protected, as well as farms begin to secure their futures and sustain the health of the lands that they rely on for food and income. Most importantly, our planet Earth will benefit from these changes as we specifically target climate action in agricultural communities and highlight the effects climate change will have on their livelihood and well-being should they fail to take action now. We would also work with smaller communities as well as companies that manufacture farming equipment to produce more environmentally friendly equipment and ensure their implementation in farms. This would include encouraging the creation of solar-powered farming equipment and filtration systems for exhaust that would allow these pollutants to be transformed into more useful products. For example, GraviKey Labs has created such a system that allows exhaust to be turned into ink for pens and other tools. Overall, this would help to minimize the detrimental effects of climate change and preserve the fertility of land for years to come. This solution would also contribute to continued sustainability in the agriculture industry and fight against world hunger and poverty.
Is there evidence to support that this process meets the initial objective of making polluting products useful? Why could one trust that this scheme will fulfill the main objective and not be like those implemented without significant results? How will they reach all the people who use these objects to make the contribution of the system?
GraviKey Labs created technology called Collink. Collink is a cylindrical device that fits into diesel generator's exhaust system or exhaust pipe and can collect up to 93% of total emissions. This exhaust is then processed to remove heavy metals and carcinogens, resulting in carbon-based pigment, which can be used for various different products. Rather than just giving these communities guidelines and encouraging them to abide by them, we will educate and motivate the people to adhere to these guidelines and work to create programs to ensure these systems are sustained. We will motivate communities to take action by educating them on possible results if they fail to do so, such as loss of land source, loss of income, and general loss of land.
Please specify exactly how solar-powered equipment and filtration systems will turn pollutants into useful products such as ink for pens. What is the process and how will you incentivize companies to produce environmentally friendly products?
I think we touched upon this in our first question from Transparent and Equal. Firstly, we would highlight the fact that renewable energy is a growing market, whereas the fossil fuel industry is slowing as more people are realizing its damaging effects. Second, according to USA Today and Business Insider, renewable energy sources are coming close to competing in price with fossil fuels and have recently surpassed coal in affordability, where coal comes in at $102 per megawatt per hour, while solar energy comes in at about $50 per megawatt per hour. It would be advisable to businesses to leap into this burgeoning market rather than relying on increasingly obsolete sources of energy.
Which parts of the world specifically do you plan to target, and how many people will be affected by this, and how will you fund such an educational process?
Desertification affects almost every continent in the world. Over 1/3 of the world's land surface is vulnerable to the effects of desertification, particularly in these subtropical desert regions, which include areas in North Africa, the Middle East, Australia, China, and South America. According to the UN itself, the livelihoods of more than 1 billion people in some 100 countries are threatened by desertification. We intend to fund this mission primarily by donations to the UN itself and to this particular mission.
Many people already attempt to act according to guidelines. Why have these failed to solve a problem, and why will that not happen in your case?
I believe we already touched upon this in our second question from Transparent and Equal.
How will you incentivize companies to purchase your more expensive product when companies' goals are primarily centered around making a profit?
We touched on this a bit in our question from Race Against E-Waste, but we believe that by highlighting the fact that renewable energy is a growing market while the fossil fuel business is slowing, businesses will be more inclined to create more renewable products, as we've seen in recent years with the demand for expansion of renewable energy. To push more people to implement this new technology, we would show that it has been proven that solar-powered tractors are more efficient than those powered by fossil fuels, both in terms of cost and in power. Solar-powered tractors have also been proven to have a longer lifespan and to require less maintenance than those powered by fossil fuels, according to MotherEarthNews.com, among other sources.
Some strengths of this project are that it explains what desertification is really well, how it affects the environment, and how to stop it. The idea to educate agricultural communities about the harmful effects of desertification is also good because it will enable people to combat it. The proposal video animation is able to convey the step-by-step through the process of desertification.
We also feel that it was a good idea to educate agricultural communities about the harmful effects of desertification and how it can be combated. Also, this group can potentially work with agriculture companies to produce environmentally friendly farming tools or equipment such as solar-powered tools and filtration and irrigation systems. Lastly, we feel that it was a great idea to transform pollutants to make useful products such as ink-proof pens in order to protect the environment.
We really liked how you included visuals and engaging animations to make your presentation easy to follow. It was very visually appealing and conveyed your ideas much more effectively.
The problem of desertification was also thoroughly explained, which helped convey the exigency of combating it. Desertification is a serious problem, especially within the context of modern climate change, and we admire how you aim to tackle it.
The concept of promoting education is definitely a valuable long-term goal and is highly rewarding in the long run, so we appreciate the fact that you made education the main goal of the solution.
For this team, we thought that a strength is that they use sources to back up their arguments, which made their points more strong, and we really like that.
Yeah, and we also thought that they do a really good job in explaining the problem that is desertification and the consequences of the problem.
Yeah, additionally, our team considered very positive how the team considers more long-lasting changes, mentioning the longer lifespan, something that will call the investors' attention. Also, the project takes the most advantage of the current communication revolution era, as Jean-Michel Cousteau mentions, where social media is at its boost stage, meaning the project can make a great use of these facts at a time where communication reaches almost every corner.
We believe that it's a great idea to educate people on agriculture and to prevent desertification in wet and dry ones. But
one weakness of this project is that it may be difficult to convince some farmers to abide by these suggestions or regulations. Many farmers may be accustomed to their own methods, and it'll be hard to make them change completely. This is especially true if the farmland is privately owned by the farmer. The problem can only be solved if the farmers agree to implement your solution.
There isn't really a concrete solution as to how to stop desertification because everything cannot be implemented through encouragement alone. For example, nowadays, people are highly encouraged using science to wear masks during the COVID-19 pandemic to prevent the spread of disease. And yet, a large amount of people across the country highly disagree and refuse to do so. If it is too expensive to make or too time-consuming to come up with better solutions, environmentally friendly equipment, it is of no benefit to the environment and will only create further financial burdens on farmers if forced to buy and utilize. What resources will be provided to agricultural communities besides education and potentially helpful, environmentally friendly farming equipment, assuming it is even able to be manufactured?
While we do value promoting education, we do not believe it is a legitimate solution that will produce tangible results for a problem such as desertification, which would require a much more detailed plan that would guarantee an impact. Your proposal is currently a campaign to raise awareness about the issue, but there must exist a feasible plan of action in order to foster true change.
To clarify, the proposal overall could use more detail in the plan regarding specific funding and implementation. Details like the total costs of transportation and education would be necessary to show that it is a viable plan. Since the aim of this competition is to achieve your goal before 2030, we believe that solely relying on encouraging education, while in the long term may work, is unrealistic in the short term.
In addition, it does not seem that your plan has a sustainable source of income to fund these expenditures. How will you fund the education process, the routine checks to make sure your guidelines are being followed, and new irrigation systems to replace old inefficient ones? We believe that having a consistent supply of funding would make your plan much more viable, as currently it appears to be unprofitable and unreasonable, which would make it difficult to sustain in the long term.
For weaknesses, our team believes the video should specify the guidelines that are going to be used and why these will be more successfully implemented, carried, and respected. Also, when the team mentions equipment, it doesn't develop on the cost, and besides making it cheap, how they'll make it eco-friendly, keeping in mind it will be aimed at a mass production point of view. The video also doesn't mention how long will it take until the project is sustainably and effectively achieved and should develop and explore further when mentioning the protection of the economies or the new irrigation systems.
Yeah, and these type of problems are no strangers to guidelines. So it would be better if the team had specified what differentiates your guidelines and what will you be doing different to make sure that these guidelines are followed as many others have failed.
Also, the team seems to have rushed slightly on the Q&A section, and although the video presentation is very engaging and pleasant to the eye, the music does distract the viewer.
The whole point of fighting desertification is it's a great idea, and we believe that this is something that's necessary. You have to teach people how to keep up with agriculture and make sure they're being able to feed there. They're creating a surplus. They're feeding their sort of wherever they're living. But the important thing that we believe was being missed in here was the fact that this is a one-size-fits-all sort of operation, and that there's no, we're going to do this data-driven. We're going to allow you to, what is your climate like? How are you going to grow more crops? This is not data-driven. This is a one-size-fits-all sort of, curriculum where there's a lot of different climate differences between, let's say, you're talking about Somalia and between China. There are way too different ways to grow crops in these places. And if you're going to give something that's way different for these places, we don't see the effectiveness there.
A few recommendations would be to come up with a funding plan for solar-powered farming equipment/filtration systems. How will you incentivize companies to help you with this venture? Also, come up with alternatives to help stop desertification if environmentally friendly equipment is not feasible to create, either due to material shortages or inability to fund such new innovation.
Thus, we highly recommend explaining how you will acquire a consistent source of income to fund your plan in order to make for a more realistic implementation. This would make the plan much more sustainable and appealing to investors.
Although we liked how you explained the severe consequences of desertification in depth, we suggest that you spend less time in describing the problem and more time on your solution during your presentation in order to draw more attention to what you're contributing, and also that you have more time to explain the benefits of your solution.
Our first recommendation would be to once again specify your guidelines, as it is very vague and it leaves the audience very unsure of how are you going to implement it and how well it will work and how it differentiates the team's solution to past solutions that also involve guidelines.
Besides specifying the guidelines, our team recommends, besides the awareness promoted, to also promote action. For example, through workshops, conversations between specialists, conversations with the public, online. For these, the team could see some of the work done by Soul Buffalo, where they trigger dialogue between people and professionals, where one can witness the whole community just coming together. Another option would be talking to low incomers or people who rely on or are impacted by the issue being solved in order to understand their point of view and add inclusion to the discussion and the solution using the advice of the experience, as it is being done in projects like One Ocean Hub. Alongside such, the team could also look into business awareness through training, for example, where they could then receive income by teaching what they learn while training, and responses, for example, through set reports. These business motivations would encourage normal citizens to go to these trainings and self-educate, but also spread this knowledge to other people, to which they could also have equal rewards to people and or businesses.
Make sure that your curriculum is keeping up with the times.